He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Welcome to a space where emotions cease to be a natural disaster and instead become data for analysis. True power is not the absence of feelings, nor is it their suppression or an ascetic flight from the world. It is the architectural mastery of managing one's own reactions. Most people are merely biological automatons, reacting to external stimuli according to patterns dictated by evolution. They take offense when they are insulted. They feel fear when they are threatened. They offer excuses when they feel guilt. To become that which you fear becoming, according to the canons of Nietzsche, means to embrace your shadow side, your will to power, and to subject it to the rigid control of the prefrontal cortex. We shall not learn how to be good. We shall learn how to be sovereign. Self-possession is not a wall. It is a filter. In this cycle, we shall examine how to transform your mind into an operating system where every decision is made based on logic and long-term strategy, rather than a momentary chemical surge in the limbic system. Module 1. The Architecture of Inner Silence 1. Stage. The scenario. The observation. A spacious living room in a country house. A family dinner. On the table, roasted duck and expensive wine. Julian sits at the head of the table. His palms rest calmly on his knees beneath the tablecloth. Opposite him is Marcus, whose voice grows louder with every passing minute. "You have always considered yourself better than us, Julian," Marcus says, leaning forward. His pupils are slightly dilated, a sign of sympathetic nervous system activation, and his upper lip twitches imperceptibly, a micro-expression of contempt. "Your investment strategies are nothing more than luck, layered upon selfishness. You sacrifice the family for the sake of figures in a report." Eleanor, sitting to the right, freezes with a glass in her hand. She expects an outburst, excuses, or at least an angry look. Julian, internal monologue. Subject Marcus has transitioned to direct verbal aggression. His goal is to provoke my limbic response, to force me to defend myself. If I begin to justify my actions, I acknowledge his right to judge me. If I shout, I lose status. My pulse is 72 beats per minute. Cortisol levels are normal. I observe the contraction of his zygomaticus major muscle. He seeks validation of his own significance through my humiliation. Probability of his maneuver succeeding, 0%. Julian takes a slow, barely perceptible breath through his nose. He does not avert his eyes, yet he does not make them aggressive. His gaze is focused on the bridge of Marcus's nose. This creates a sensation of dominant yet calm observation. "That is an interesting interpretation of events, Marcus," Julian says in a steady, low voice. Not a single muscle on his face flinches. "Tell me, is this opinion based on an analysis of the financial statements for the last 4 quarters, or on your current emotional state?" The goal of the question: to shift the dialogue from the emotional field to the cognitive one, forcing the opponent's brain to switch to logical data processing. Marcus hesitates. His biological rhythm is disrupted. He expected a counter-strike, but he met a void. 2. Stage. System analysis. Psychological scan. In this scene, we observe a classic attempt at social hierarchical correction. Marcus attempts to lower Julian's status by utilizing the mechanism of imposing guilt. From the perspective of neurobiology, at this moment, Julian's brain is undergoing an attack on social safety. When a person hears criticism, the amygdala instantaneously sends an alarm signal, triggering the fight or flight reaction. In most people, this manifests as skin flushing, accelerated speech, and a narrowing of cognitive focus. They cease to see the situation as a whole and become fixated on defense. Julian employs the technique of cognitive reappraisal. Instead of perceiving Marcus's words as a personal insult, he classifies them as external noise or the biological signal of an opponent. This allows the prefrontal cortex to maintain control over the limbic system. The conscious slowing of speech tempo and the control over micro-expressions, the absence of raised eyebrows or pursed lips, sends a signal to Julian's own brain. The situation is under control. There is no threat. This creates a positive feedback loop, strengthening the state of homeostasis. 3. Stage, the scientific validation, scientific precedent. This mechanism is closely linked to the research of Paul Ekman in the field of micro-expressions and emotional intelligence. Ekman proved that there is a two-way connection between facial expressions and internal states. We do not only smile when we feel good, but we actually feel slightly better when we smile. In Julian's case, the reverse principle is at work. The conscious maintenance of the face in a state of a neutral mask prevents the intensification of anger within. Furthermore, it is appropriate here to recall the concept of amygdala hijack, described by Daniel Goleman. This is a state in which the emotional center of the brain takes over control before the rational mind has time to intervene. The difference between Julian and the other dinner participants lies in his ability to create a 1-second gap between the stimulus, the insult, and the reaction. This gap is the foundation of the will, according to Nietzsche. It is the moment when a human being ceases to be an animal and becomes the legislator of their own reactions. In experiments with functional MRI, it has been noted that individuals with high levels of self-possession demonstrate increased activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which literally extinguishes the impulses originating from the deeper regions of the brain. 4. Stage, the master key, strategic protocol. To maintain a leadership position under social pressure, it is necessary to implement the following algorithm. Control, principle number 1, depersonalization of the incoming flow. Never perceive an opponent's words as the truth about yourself. Perceive them as information regarding the state of the one speaking. If Marcus is shouting at you, he is not exposing you. He is informing the system that he has lost control over his emotions and requires your reaction to stabilize his ego. How to apply? The 3-second rule. Before answering a provocative question, mentally name 3 objects in the room and their colors. This will switch the brain from emotional mode to analytical mode. Vocal grounding. Speak half a tone quieter and 10% slower than your opponent. He who sets the tempo of communication owns the situation. The researcher's gaze. Look at the aggressor as if you are a biologist, observing a rare species of primate in a moment of a mating dance or a fit of rage. This mental distancing instantaneously relieves emotional tension. 5. Stage, atmosphere of statics. The noise outside the window subsides. The light from the lamp falls upon the tablecloth, creating sharp, geometrically precise shadows from the cutlery. The room smells of old wood and cold air from a slightly ajar window. Julian takes a knife and accurately slices a piece of duck. The movement is calculated. The hand follows an ideal trajectory. In this space there is no room for chaos, only clarity, order, and the quiet rustle of thoughts arranged in flawless rows. Your conscience shall say to you, become who you are. Module 2. The Art of Strategic Alienation. 1. Stage. The scenario. The observation. A conference hall made of glass and steel. Outside the window, a gray industrial landscape of the metropolis. Caleb sits in a chair, leaning back slightly. His shoulders are relaxed. Opposite him is Eleanor, the executive director, whose slender fingers drum continuously on the surface of the table, a sign of suppressed anxiety and an attempt to impose her rhythm on those around her. Caleb, your refusal to support the merger looks like sabotage. Eleanor narrows her eyes, fixing her gaze on the bridge of his nose, attempting to use a dominance technique. The entire board of directors has already voted in favor. You are left alone. Do you truly wish to be the one who destroys this deal, utilizing social isolation as a tool of pressure? Around the table sit four other colleagues. They studiously avoid Caleb's gaze, demonstrating classic herd behavior in the face of a leader. Caleb, internal monologue. Subject Eleanor is utilizing the tactic of social ostracism. My brain records the threat of exclusion from the group, an ancient instinct from the time when exile from the tribe meant death. I record a slight tingling in my fingertips, a release of a microdose of adrenaline. The probability that she will actually proceed to an open conflict is 12%. She is bluffing, relying on the silent consent of the others. I observe my fear of being an outcast as a chemical process. It is not I who fear. It is my neurons reacting to a stimulus. I choose to ignore this biological noise. Caleb maintains a pause of 5 seconds. This time is necessary for the opponent's limbic system to begin generating uncertainty due to the absence of the expected reaction. Eleanor, Caleb pronounces her name softly, almost intimately, which instantaneously breaks her aggressive mood. Your argument is built upon the number of those in agreement, not on the quality of the data. My analysis shows that in 9 months, the debt burden will consume our profit. To be the one who speaks the inconvenient truth when others prefer a comfortable lie, that is not sabotage. That is the hygiene of management, seizing the initiative by establishing new moral coordinates. Eleanor freezes. She sees before her a person who cannot be intimidated by public opinion. 2. Stage, system analysis, psychological scan. In this interaction, we see a collision between individual sovereignty and group conformity. Caleb demonstrates a high level of cognitive autonomy. Most people are programmed to seek approval. When a group exerts pressure, the anterior cingulate cortex is activated in the brain, signaling an error if our opinion diverges from the opinion of the majority. This causes a state of psychological discomfort, forcing the individual to adjust in order to relieve the tension. Caleb utilizes a meta position. He does not participate in the argument. He analyzes the structure of the argument. His calmness is based on the realization that the fear of becoming the bad guy or the enemy of the collective is merely an evolutionary rudiment. To become that which you fear becoming, in this context, means to accept the role of the antagonist if that role is logically justified. He does not fight the system. He removes himself beyond its boundaries, becoming unpredictable and, consequently, dangerous to the manipulator. 3. Stage, the scientific validation, scientific precedent. This scenario is a direct illustration of Solomon Asch's experiments on conformity, conducted in 1951. Asch proved that approximately 75% of participants agreed at least once with a knowingly incorrect opinion of the majority, simply to avoid standing out. However, Asch also discovered a critically important fact. If even one person appears in the group who expresses an alternative opinion, the level of conformity among the other participants drops threefold. Caleb acts as this single dissident. His steadfastness is not mere stubbornness, it is a neurobiological detonator. By his calmness, he gives tacit permission to other members of the group to begin doubting Eleanor's position. He destroys the illusion of unanimity using only his endurance and the absence of emotional reactions to accusations. 4. Stage, the master key, strategic protocol. To gain power over the social environment, it is necessary to accept the possibility of being rejected. This makes you invulnerable to manipulations based on a sense of guilt or fear of censure. Control. Principle number 2. Acceptance of the role of the antagonist. Your goal is not sympathy, but respect for your rationality. If the price for maintaining your intellectual integrity is the status of a difficult person, pay it without hesitation. How to apply? The method of linguistic alienation. Describe your feelings in the third person. Not, I am afraid, but activation of the amygdala is observed in response to a verbal attack. This transforms you from a participant into an observer. Ignoring adjectives. In the opponent's speech, cut away all evaluative words: sabotage, selfishness, betrayal. Focus only on verbs and facts. If you remove the emotions from Eleanor's words, only this remains: you do not agree with the majority. This sounds not frightening, but factual. The pause as a vacuum. After a sharp question, remain silent for 2 seconds longer than etiquette requires. Manipulators fear silence. They attempt to fill it with unnecessary words, in which they reveal their weak points. 5. Stage. Atmosphere of statics. On the glass table lies the thin barrel of Caleb's pen, reflecting the cold light of the fluorescent lamps. An absolute silence reigns in the hall, in which only the steady hum of the ventilation system is heard. The air seems sterile. In this silence there is no tension, only the crystalline clarity of a person who has realized that the boundaries of his world are defined not by another's opinion, but by his own will. Everything superfluous has been cut away. Only the strategy remains. He who is strong is powerful, and he who is powerful has the right. When we cannot do something, we say that it is forbidden. Module 3. The geometry of the emotional vacuum. 1. Stage. The scenario. The observation. A private box in an opera house. The thick scent of velvet and expensive perfume. Julian sits in the front row. His back does not touch the back of the chair, a perfect vertical. Beside him is Eleanor, whose breathing is intermittent. During the intermission, Marcus enters. His movements are excessively expansive. He occupies too much space, an attempt at territorial dominance. Julian, I heard about your decision regarding the fund. Marcus leans his palm against the edge of Julian's chair, invading his intimate zone, a distance of less than 45 centimeters. It was cruel. People were counting on that money. Do you realize that now you will be called an executioner, utilizing emotionally charged labels to stimulate a sense of guilt? Julian does not turn his head. He continues to look at the empty stage. His eyelids are slightly lowered, signaling a low level of cognitive stress. Julian, internal monologue. Subject, Marcus, utilizes the archetype of the protector of the weak to occupy a morally superior position. He appeals to public opinion, which he himself is constructing at this very moment. My amygdala records an attempt at social pressure. Reaction, ignoring. I observe how my body wants to tense my jaw. I consciously relax the masseter muscles. Guilt is a social construct intended for managing the recalcitrant elements of the system. I accept the role of the executioner because in this coordinate system, it is merely a word devoid of physical weight. Julian slowly turns his head toward Marcus. His gaze is directed not into the eyes, but at a point slightly above the opponent's forehead. Marcus. Julian pauses for 4 seconds, forcing the other to feel the inappropriateness of his presence. You use the word executioner as a tool of pressure. No, let us be precise. I merely cease the subsidization of an inefficient mechanism. The moral evaluation of this action is your way of dealing with your own inability to influence the situation. You fear being bad, therefore you are weak. A direct attack on the opponent's base value, his need for moral approval. Marcus pulls away. His palm slips from the chair. His social mask develops a crack. 2. Stage, system analysis, psychological scan. In this scene, we see the application of the tactic amor fati, love of fate, in its dark interpretation. Julian does not fear becoming that which society uses to frighten him. He accepts the imposed role and thereby deprives Marcus of the lever of control. From the standpoint of neurobiology, the mechanism of cognitive distancing is at work here. When someone attempts to shame us, the brain activates the insular cortex, which is responsible for the feeling of disgust, in this case, toward oneself. Julian blocks this process, shifting attention from the content of the accusation to the structure of the manipulation. He analyzes Marcus as a biological object that emits sound vibrations of a certain frequency. This transforms a potential psychological trauma into an ordinary set of data. The ability to maintain the stillness of the torso during an invasion of personal space testifies to the suppression of the reflex reaction to a threat. This is a sign of the superiority of the prefrontal cortex over the brainstem structures. 3. Stage, the scientific validation, scientific precedent. This scenario illustrates the phenomenon known as the spotlight effect, studied by Thomas Gilovich. Most people tend to catastrophically exaggerate the degree of attention that those around them pay to their moral errors or shortcomings. Julian knows that the fear of becoming an executioner in the eyes of others is a cognitive distortion. People are too occupied with themselves to remember someone else's cruelty for long, provided it does not affect them personally. Furthermore, there is a connection here to the experiments of Philip Zimbardo, the Stanford prison experiment. Zimbardo demonstrated how easily people accept roles that society considers evil or cruel if they are given the right to do so. The only difference is that Julian gives this right to himself. He does not wait for a sanction from above. He understands that morality is a tool of those who are incapable of a volitional act. By accepting the dark role, he escapes the control of the social system of rewards and punishments. 4. Stage, the master key, strategic protocol. To achieve absolute self-possession, it is necessary to learn how to use your shadow as a shield. Control principle number 3, agreement with the label. When someone attempts to wound you by accusing you of selfishness, coldness, or cruelty, never justify yourself. Justification is an admission of guilt and of the legitimacy of the judge. How to apply the "and what then" technique. If you are called an egoist, calmly reply, "That is a correct observation. My interests are a priority for me. How does this affect our current matter?" This disarms the manipulator, as he expected your defense but received confirmation instead. Sensory deprivation of the opponent. During a verbal attack, look at the details of the manipulator's clothing: a button, a thread, a collar. This lowers the significance of his words in your perception. You see not a formidable judge, but a person with a poorly tied necktie. Verbal minimalism. Use no more than 10 words in response to a long, angry tirade. The less you speak, the more projections and fears the opponent will construct around your silence. 5. Stage, atmosphere of statics. It becomes cool in the box. Marcus leaves and his steps are muffled by the carpeted flooring of the corridor. Julian adjusts the cuff of his shirt. 3 millimeters of white fabric emerge perfectly from beneath the jacket's sleeve. The light in the hall slowly fades, leaving only the golden glow of the chandelier. In this darkness there is no fear. There is only the pulsation of pure intellect, which has realized to be a monster in the eyes of slaves is the only way to remain free. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Module 4. The Aesthetics of Controlled Chaos. 1. Stage, the scenario. The observation. The roof of a skyscraper converted into a private club. A cold wind tears drops of rain from the parapet. Caleb stands at the very edge, looking at the city lights. Behind him is Marcus, whose voice vibrates with hidden triumph. In Marcus's hands is a tablet with data that could destroy Caleb's reputation in a single night. I have everything, Caleb. Accounts, signatures, testimonies from two of your former partners. Marcus takes a step forward, closing the distance to 1.5 meters. His shoulders are raised and his chin is thrust forward, a demonstration of confidence in his victory. You always played the part of the pure genius. Now you will become the one whom everyone will despise. What do you feel, knowing that your empire is crumbling? An attempt to induce panic and paralyze the victim's will. Caleb slowly turns around. His face is illuminated only by the neon light of a sign. His pupils are stable. He does not blink more often than usual, the absence of threat detection by the cognitive apparatus. Caleb, internal monologue. Subject Marcus believes that he possesses a lever of pressure. He expects my plea for mercy or an attempt to justify myself. My pulse has increased to 88 beats per minute, a normal physiological reaction to the cold and the release of norepinephrine. I do not suppress this chaos within. I direct it toward sharpening my perception. I see how the pinky finger on his left hand is trembling. He fears his success more than I fear my defeat. The probability that he has already sent the data is less than 10%. He needs my humiliation, not merely my ruin. I shall utilize this gap. Caleb takes a step toward Marcus, invading his safety zone. On his lips appears a barely perceptible, almost frightening smile. Did you come here to see my fear, Marcus? Caleb's voice sounds frighteningly soft, with a slight intonation of curiosity. But you were mistaken in one thing. I do not fear becoming the fallen. I fear only one thing, becoming predictable, like you. Publish it. Right now. I want to see how this city consumes what I have built for 10 years, and how I shall build something more fearsome upon these ruins, utilizing a paradoxical reaction to destroy the aggressor's scenario. Marcus freezes. His finger hovers over the screen. His biological predator-prey program fails because the prey has suddenly begun to derive pleasure from its own destruction. 2. Stage, system analysis, psychological scan. In this module, we analyze the highest form of self-possession, paradoxical intention combined with the concept of the overman. Caleb does not fight the chaos of the situation. He makes the chaos part of his plan. When a manipulator presents an ultimatum, he relies on your attachment to status, comfort, or safety. These are your hooks. As soon as you declare and demonstrate with your entire body that you are ready to lose everything, the manipulator loses power. Neurobiologically, Caleb utilizes an amygdala hijack in the reverse direction. Instead of falling into a stupor, he translates the energy of stress into a state of cold flow. His smile is not a social signal of joy, but a tool of biological disorientation for the opponent. In nature, a predator that laughs in the face of danger is perceived as deadly dangerous and, perhaps, insane. This triggers an instantaneous surge of cortisol in Marcus and a desire to retreat. 3. Stage. The scientific validation. Scientific precedent. This method resonates with the madman theory in international politics, which was actively utilized by Richard Nixon. The essence of the strategy lies in making the opponent believe that you are irrational, unpredictable, and ready for extreme measures, even if they harm you yourself. In conditions of uncertainty, a rational player, in this case Marcus, always retreats, as he cannot calculate the risks. Furthermore, it is appropriate to mention Viktor Frankl's research on paradoxical intention. Frankl proved that fear intensifies that which we fear, but if we consciously desire that which we fear, the fear disappears. Caleb desires his ruin, and at that moment he becomes free from blackmail. Experiments in the field of social psychology show that in a conflict, it is not the one with more resources who wins, but the one who demonstrates a higher readiness for risk. Caleb nullifies the value of Marcus's evidence simply by refusing to recognize it as a threat. 4. Stage. The master key. Strategic protocol. To become invulnerable, one must learn to destroy the opponent's expectations in the most radical manner. Control. Principle number 4. Radical acceptance of the worst-case scenario. Your strength is directly proportional to your ability to let go of that which you hold on to. If you are ready to become that which they fear to see you as, you become invincible. How to apply. The burning bridges. Technique. At the beginning of any sharp conflict, mentally accept the fact that you have already lost. Taste the flavor of defeat. As soon as the fear of loss disappears, you will be able to act with surgical precision, without being distracted by emotions. The paradoxical response. To a direct threat, respond with agreement or an escalation of the threat. If you are told, "I will fire you," reply, "Do it before 5 o'clock. I have been wanting to focus on my own project." This deprives the opponent of the status of a benefactor. Controlled irrationality. Introduce elements into your behavior that do not yield to the opponent's logic. An unexpected pause, a change of topic to something philosophical, or a strange smile forces the adversary to doubt your sanity, which automatically increases his stress level. 5. Stage. Atmosphere of statics. The rain intensifies, transforming the city into a blurred canvas of gray and blue spots. Caleb stands motionless. His coat is soaked through, but he does not feel discomfort. Marcus slowly lowers the tablet and takes a step back, dissolving into the shadows of the stairway entrance. On the roof, only Caleb remains, along with an absolute ringing calmness. The chaos around him no longer threatens. It is subdued. In this silence, only the steady fall of drops against the concrete is heard, like the ticking of a clock measuring the time of a new reality. Module 5. The Sovereignty of the Overman One. Stage. The Scenario. The Observation. The marble hall of the Philharmonic after the conclusion of a private reception. Julian stands by a massive column, finishing a glass of mineral water. Marcus heads toward him. His necktie is slightly loosened, and his face is flushed from drink and hidden irritation. In the doorway, Eleanor freezes, observing the final act of their prolonged confrontation. "You won, Julian. You got the contract. You pushed me out of the board," Marcus speaks in a low, venomous whisper. "But look at yourself. You have become the very mechanism that we all despised. There is nothing human left in you. You are merely an efficient algorithm. Do you not feel lonely in your vacuum?" An attempt to utilize existential anxiety and the fear of loneliness to destabilize Julian. Julian slowly places the glass on the tray of a passing waiter. His movements are devoid of haste. Julian, internal monologue. Subject Marcus is undertaking a final attempt at a social attack, appealing to my basic needs for belonging and intimacy. My brain analyzes the word loneliness. From a biological perspective, this is a signal regarding a threat to survival outside the group. But my prefrontal cortex has already been reconfigured. I observe the contraction of the muscles in his neck. The probability that his words will cause an emotional response in me is less than 1%. I have not become an algorithm. I have become the architect of my reality. His fear is his projection. My internal response is silence. Julian looks directly into Marcus's eyes. In his gaze there is neither warmth nor hatred, only a deep, almost scientific understanding. "Loneliness, Marcus, is the price one pays for the right not to be part of the crowd. Julian's voice sounds clear and resonant in the emptying hall. You call me an algorithm because you cannot calculate my actions within your categories of good and evil. You do not fear that I have lost my humanity. You fear that I have found a strength that does not require your approval. The final destruction of the hierarchical link of judge and defendant. Julian nods slightly and heads toward the exit, leaving Marcus in the space of his own impotence. 2. Stage, system analysis, psychological scan. In this final module, we see the achievement of a state of internal locus of control in its absolute manifestation. Julian has fully integrated his shadow. He has become that which he feared becoming at the beginning of the journey. A person who is absolutely independent of social evaluation. From the perspective of neurobiology, Julian demonstrates the phenomenon of the default mode network of the brain, operating in a regime of high awareness. When an ordinary person is subjected to social criticism, their brain begins an endless cycle of self-rumination and anxiety. In Julian's case, however, new neural connections have been formed that interpret external aggression as erroneous code from an external source. His self-possession is not the suppression of emotions, but their high differentiation. He feels Marcus's tension, but he does not resonate with it. This is a state of emotional asepsis. He has transitioned from the stage of survival in a social hierarchy to the stage of constructing it. His brain no longer wastes energy on maintaining a social facade. All energy is directed toward the realization of the will. 3. Stage, the scientific validation, scientific precedent. This scenario finds confirmation in the self-determination theory of Edward D.C. and Richard Ryan. Research shows that autonomy, competence, and social relatedness are the three basic needs of a human being. However, Julian has revised the third need. He has replaced relatedness through approval with relatedness through influence. Furthermore, it is appropriate here to mention Walter Mischel's marshmallow test, but in its expanded interpretation. This is not merely about delayed gratification, eating one marshmallow now or two later, but about the ability to sacrifice momentary social comfort for the sake of long-term sovereignty. Julian passed this test at the level of his entire life. Research by neurobiologist Antonio Damasio on somatic markers confirms when a person makes a decision based on an internal code rather than on the fear of punishment, their biological indicators, pulse, skin conductance, remain stable even in conditions of extreme social pressure. Julian has literally retrained his nervous system not to react to social whips. 4. Stage, the master key, strategic protocol. The final step to gaining power over oneself is the recognition of oneself as the sole source of values. Control. Principle number 5. Monopoly on meaning. No one can give you an evaluation that you have not permitted yourself to accept. You are the sole legislator in your internal empire. How to apply. Audit of authorities. Every week ask yourself, whose opinion today made me doubt myself? Identify this voice and deprive it of the right to speak in your head. The glass bell technique. In moments of criticism, imagine that between you and the opponent there is soundproof glass. You see the movement of the lips. You understand the meaning of the words, but the sound wave does not reach your nerve endings. This is pure information, devoid of emotional charge. Investment in sovereignty. Every time you do something that evokes the condemnation of the weak but corresponds to your strategy, celebrate it. This is a sign that you are no longer part of the herd. 5. Stage, atmosphere of statics. Julian steps out onto the street. The night city is flooded with the cold white light of street lamps. The air is frosty and absolutely transparent. The silence is so deep that every step Julian takes on the cleared sidewalk is audible. In the sky, one bright star devoid of twinkling. There are no superfluous sounds, no superfluous people, no superfluous thoughts. Only an infinite space ready to take any form he wishes to bestow upon it. The cycle is complete. The mechanics of self-possession have become his nature. Man is a rope, stretched between animal and overman, a rope over an abyss, a dangerous crossing, a dangerous wayfaring, a dangerous looking back, a dangerous trembling and halting. Final protocol, the point of no return. We have completed the dismantling of the old system of reactions. 5 modules, 5 stages of cognitive restructuring. This is not merely a set of tactics. These are the blueprints for a new architecture of your personality. You entered this cycle fearing your own dark side, your coldness and detachment. You feared becoming that which society calls soulless. Now you understand. That which the crowd calls an absence of soul is merely the presence of a disciplined intellect. Julian, Caleb, Eleanor, and Marcus are merely shadows on the wall of the cave, projections of those biological and social forces with which you collide daily. Now you know that behind every angry tirade of Marcus lies only the biochemistry of fear, and behind every manipulation of Eleanor is an attempt to stabilize her own fragile hierarchy. You are no longer a participant in their drama. You are its analyst. Your brain has traveled the path from amygdalar slavery to the sovereignty of the prefrontal cortex. You have learned to create that very 1-second gap between an external irritant and your action. In this gap, true freedom is born, that very will to power of which Nietzsche wrote. This is power not over others, but over the mechanisms of your own self. Principle 0. The ultimate installation. Become the one who observes the observer. Your self-possession is now not armor that can crack, but the very fabric of your reality. There is nothing that could throw you off balance, because there is no longer that sensitive self for a manipulator to hook into. You have become transparent and hard like a diamond. Applied. Conclusion. One law. Information is more important than interpretation. One path. Renunciation of the search for approval. One goal. Preservation of the purity of thought in any chaos. The atmosphere of absolute zero. Ideal order reigns in the office. On the black surface of the table there is not a single speck of dust. Outside the window, deep night, and the city lights seem merely like distant electrical impulses in a complex circuit. You sit motionless. Your breathing is slow, deep, almost inaudible. In your head, not a swarm of thoughts, but a cold, moonlight-flooded hall where every decision is laid out on its own shelves. Fear has vanished. In its place, a void has emerged, but this is not the void of loss. It is the void of a space ready for creation. You have become that which you feared becoming, and looking at this result, you realize there was nothing to fear. You have attained silence. He who understands the mechanisms of the psyche gains true freedom. Subscribe to analyze the hidden laws of human behavior together, and be certain to write in the comments which strategy should be examined in the next installment.